Happy Monday evening, everyone. Giving another update on what is likely going to be a very historic blizzard to impact a pretty big portion of the eastern United States and especially the Great Lakes region. I think are really going to get hammered pretty hard with this thing. So, starting off, I just want to give a pretty big thank you to all the support I've received over the past week with these videos. I've gotten a lot more views than I normally do and engagement overall with my videos. So let me know where you're watching from, and if you ever have any questions that maybe I didn't cover in the video, or you just like me to elaborate on something, feel free to ask in the comments. I love engaging with you guys and just talking weather. So that's enough of that. Let's go ahead and get right into it because we have a lot to talk about. So we now have winter storm watches issued for a pretty big portion of the Midwest here and northern Great Plains, from pretty much just about the entire state of South Dakota down into Iowa, Nebraska, and Minnesota, and into western Wisconsin. We also have some more issued down here going into Illinois and Indiana from those National Weather Service offices. So again, we're getting really close now. We're going to start getting into the short range guidance here within the next day or two, and we'll really be able to fine tune a lot of these details. But models overall have really come into very good agreement over the past day or two that we're going to have blizzard conditions of pretty historic proportions through a big portion of the Midwest and Great Lakes region. Before we get to that, though, I do want to talk about a sneaky little setup here in the southeast where we could see a couple flakes fly in the Carolinas going into tomorrow night, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. So we've been talking about this for the past couple videos. This is the Euro, and as you can see, we've been talking about this low pressure that moves through, but that moisture is really getting pulled pretty far north, and here in the Euro, seeing a little bit of blue pop up into the southwestern mountains of North Carolina. And we've had other runs of the NAM show, even some snow breaking out further south into the upstate of South Carolina. So I don't expect this to be a big event, but we'll go ahead and show the latest NAM as well, just for transparency here. So this run with the NAM, again, you can see the low pressure moving through here and rain starting to break out into the southern Georgia and southern Carolinas. But again, you get enough precipitation sliding just far enough north here that this could produce some flurries and even light snow across portions of the Carolinas. Again, this run of the NAM doesn't really show anything too crazy, but see some blue breaking out here into portions of North Carolina and South Carolina. So another thing I want to show here, this is the Euro ensemble showing the likelihood of seeing an inch of snow within a 24-hour period. And as you can see here, this is pretty impressive to see numbers like this. Obviously nothing off the charts, but here into the mountains of North Carolina, southwestern mountains, and even portions of upstate South Carolina going into the mountains of Oconee County, Pickens County, and up towards Caesars Head. You're running around the 30% range here in this area of seeing an inch of snow with the Euro ensembles, and running about 10%, a little less than 10% here going into portions of central South Carolina and southeastern North Carolina. So, of course, nothing off the chart there, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see flurries fall in those areas. And if we can really get this to overperform, maybe even a dusting to a half an inch in some areas, you can get enough precipitation to fall. Temperatures will be pretty marginal. That's the biggest thing that we're fighting here, with temperatures in the mid-30s. And that'll make it pretty difficult for anything to stick that does fall. But I just wanted to give a heads up on that because a lot of the times, as I've said with the past couple of videos, these little events really sneak up on you and they overperform pretty easily. So now that we're done talking about that little system, let's go ahead and get to the entree, I guess, this week with this really big cold front that's going to push through an historic snowstorm. So the Euro, it's been holding very steady recently, with the idea of this Arctic cold front pushing into these areas. And this is why we have the winter storm watch out in these areas. As you can see, with the Euro, snow is going to be breaking out within the next 48 to 60 hours in these areas. And another thing that's going to happen in that time frame is with this Arctic front pushing through, you're going to begin to get southerly flow here and a good amount of rain moving into the southeast and mid-Atlantic regions. And as I've talked about, you could get a pretty good thumping of snow on the front end of that in areas. I think that threat is downtrended just a little bit, but don't be surprised to see a lot of this start as snow in parts of Pennsylvania and the Virginias going northward into New England. Now, as for the cold front here, again, you're getting snow to break out during or across a pretty big section here, down as far south as Oklahoma And you're getting pretty good swaths of snow into Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and up to Wisconsin. But this is really only the start of the storm. This is going into Thursday, the 22nd. As you can see, the Euro's really going to begin to ramp up this low pressure, especially once it gets over Illinois, Indiana. It's going to pull it north into the Great Lakes. And this will be about the peak of it here, going into Friday morning. I mean, you're really going to have some crazy lake effect with this off of really all of the Great Lakes here, but areas like Chicago and eastern Michigan here, Gary, Indiana, that area, you are really going to see some tremendous lake effect as this thing is pulling away. So in a lot of these areas, you're going to start as rain, and you might think, oh, well, what about this giant storm everyone's been talking about? But those temperatures are going to crash quickly, and when they do, you're going to see some tremendous snowfall rates, and the wind is absolutely going to be whipping in those areas. So I really think the bullseye with this storm in terms of the worst conditions are going to be the Great Lakes region, especially here in eastern Michigan. I think parts of Indiana really going to see the worst of it. So with the Euro, I know I have a lot of followers here in the South and Southeast, so we're going to look again at what happens here. The Euro I think, is handling this a little bit better than the GFS with how much back-end snow there is. A lot of the times, whenever you get these Arctic fronts, the cold air is so dense, it struggles to create as much lift as with cold fronts that aren't quite as cold. So that's why you struggle to get the cold air to chase the moisture. It's all that dry air kind of just suffocates the precipitation, if you will, which makes it very difficult to get snow. With that being said, though, I do think we'll see some light snow here as far south as northern Mississippi, Alabama, and up into Tennessee as the cold air comes rushing in behind the warm air. I really think, honestly, you could see accumulations from, I'd say, Nashville northbound is really going to be as far south as you see accumulating snow with this event. As we go and pull this ahead, though, looking at New England, really just some heavy blowing rain here in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and even further down into the mid-Atlantic. It's pretty ironic that just a couple days ago we were talking about this area getting potentially a historic winter storm for Christmas, and those were all the pictures you were seeing online, the crazy snow totals, and now here we are talking about blowing heavy rain in all these areas. Just goes to show you really shouldn't lock these things in any more than 3 to 5 days out. So we'll go ahead and keep moving this ahead. This is now going Friday afternoon, the 23rd. Again, this is just going to be pretty ridiculous snow totals in these areas as you're getting that wind right off of the Great Lakes. Even into New York, whenever that cold air comes flooding through, you're going to get some pretty good totals through there. Go ahead and move this ahead a little bit further out, and that's going to eventually pull out going into Christmas Eve. That's when this should pretty well get out of the United States, but you're still going to see back-end snow showers into Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. Anywhere that you usually see lake effect, you're going to see snow showers through much of Christmas Eve and even into Christmas as this begins to pull away. All right, so that is the Euro. We'll go ahead and show the GFS here. Won't spend as much time as the GFS because it's really pretty similar to the Euro. Again, same story with this little low pressure moving through. Tomorrow night could see some flakes fly in the Carolinas. But here comes that Arctic cold front moving through, snow breaking out on Wednesday through a pretty big portion here of the plains, pretty similar to what the Euro was showing. And the GFS really on board with the Euro here on this low placement. I mean, you really can't get much better agreement than this. One thing the GFS does have is a little bit more snow on the back end here in areas further south. If I can find my pencil, there we go. You get a little bit more of snow on the back end here in areas further south. So I do think you'll see flakes fly in those areas. It just probably won't amount to much. And then, again, just really ridiculous lake effect snow here. And we'll get into the wind gusts here in a second. Another thing, getting some pretty good northwest flow as far south as North Carolina. I know I've been talking about that as a pretty good threat in those regions. And even up into West Virginia and Virginia, I think you could definitely see some pretty good accumulations out of this. GFS, again, really just cranks this thing over the Great Lakes and keeps that lake effect snow around going into Christmas Eve before eventually moving up into Canada with lingering snow showers going into Christmas Day. in those areas. So that's the GFS. We'll go ahead and look at snowfall potential now with all of this. This is the blended models that the National Weather Service uses, which is a lot of main models and ensembles kind of just thrown together to get an average. So again, going through here, nothing crazy here in the southeast. You see a couple of blips maybe, and we have seen that with some other runs of maybe some very light accumulations, like a tenth of an inch, really just a dusting in those areas with the event tomorrow night. But again, cold front moves through, and you get all this snow to break out here across the plains, the northern plains, and the Midwest. Some areas could see, a half a foot of snow to potentially even a foot in parts of Wisconsin here. But you're still getting accumulations as far south as Kansas City. This blend shows about 4 inches in that area. So, take add or lose a couple inches there. We're going to move this further ahead. And again, a lot of these areas going to start as rain, and then you're going to get that super cold air to flood in behind it, and you're going to get some pretty crazy totals here with the National Weather Service blend of models. Again, I mean, the real bullseye here is going to be right on the lakes here, going into Michigan and coming off of Erie here, and even into parts of New York. This shows upwards of, nearly 2 feet of snow in some areas. I really wouldn't count that out because you're going to have multiple days of this lake effect with this wind whipping in those areas. As for areas further south, again, you're getting some northwest flow here in the mountains. I don't think it'll be anything blockbuster, but as far south as North Carolina, maybe an inch or two in the areas that are usually susceptible to that northwest flow, and then probably a little bit more up into the Virginias in the 3 to 5 inch range. As for the big question mark that we're still kind of wondering down here into the Tennessee river valleys, it's going to be a little bit more difficult here again because you're not going to have as much moisture to work with as that cold air pushes through. But I wouldn't be surprised to see an inch or two in Nashville, and then maybe even a dusting as far south as northern Alabama, northern Mississippi, and maybe even northern Georgia. But I think Tennessee northward is really where you're going to see the accumulations into Kentucky, even with 1 to 3 inches in those areas with that back end snow. So that is the snowfall accumulations. Let's go ahead and look at wind gusts now. Go ahead and move this back. Again, pretty calm across the eastern United States right now. As that low pressure moves through the Carolinas and Georgia and Alabama, it'll be a little bit of a breezy night going into Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. But this is where you really see the wind start to break out across the plains as you get this cold front to push through. I should add also, this is wind gusts, not sustained winds. So this will be what the wind will be gusting to and not sustained. Then though, you see all of this really strong winds breaking out from northern Texas all the way up to the Dakotas, anywhere from 40 to 50 miles an hour in these areas. And as that low pressure begins to really crank up, these winds get pretty ridiculous in the 50-mile-an-hour range here, going into Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and widespread 30 to 40-mile-an-hour winds, really just plastered across the entire eastern United States as this front pushes through. And as this really cranks up, especially coming off the lakes here, I wouldn't be surprised to see wind gusts anywhere from 50 to 60 miles an hour in some of these areas. And then that when it's going to continue going into Christmas Eve here, and then going into Christmas Day, that will begin to finally pull away. So with all of that wind and all the snow, blizzard conditions are going to be very likely in this general area. And another thing we have to talk about are the temperatures. Even if you're not getting snow, you are going to be a part of this brutally cold air that moves through. Even as far south as Florida and South Florida could see temperatures into the 40s. So again, this is the blend of models. You see this cold front pushing through sub-zero temperatures, flooding all the way down into parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and even the Texas Panhandle, and single-digit temperatures as far south as Tennessee going into your Christmas Eve morning, and teens throughout the deep south, as far south as southern Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, and into the Carolinas. Another problem that's going to arise with this that hasn't really been talked about too much is the potential of a flash freeze in these areas. Even if you're getting rain here in the Carolinas and the deep south and even parts of the mid-Atlantic, when this cold air comes through, it's coming through quickly. So luckily you'll have the wind, which will help dry up a lot of the water, but anything that's left whenever these temperatures come crashing down are going to freeze. So going into Christmas Eve morning, you're really going to want to be careful whenever you're traveling because there's going to be a lot of areas of black ice which a lot of times is more dangerous than snow because you see the snow, but you're not going to see ice on the roadway. So these are the temperatures, and these are going to stick around for a while. This is going into the Tuesday after Christmas, the 27th. Still highs just in the 40s in the deep south and below freezing for a lot of areas in the New England, going into the Great Lakes and the Northern Plains. So I do want to touch real quick on after this storm. There have been some hints that maybe another system will try to form. There's not too much ensemble support right now, or really any serious signal, but it's something to keep an eye on. So this is the EPS, the Euro ensembles. As you can see, we have this giant bowling ball, and this is our big storm that is going to be moving through going into Friday. And then on the tail end of this, as this is moving out, you see maybe a little piece of energy down here may try to get into the Gulf and try to ramp up just a little bit. Again, nothing crazy right now in terms of indications from the models, but a lot of times, much like this Tuesday, you get these things that long range it doesn't really look that good, but then getting into the short range, it trends to something maybe a little bit stronger and a little bit further north and northwest, as we saw happen with this system. So we'll keep an eye on this in the southeast and northeast to see if maybe we can kind of redeem ourselves after this storm, going a little bit after Christmas into the maybe 26th through 28th time frame. So that is really all I have for this video. Again, huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed and watched the other videos I've posted these past couple days. They have had a lot more support than I normally receive, which is really awesome and motivates me to keep on going. So, and again, let me know where you're watching from, and if you have any other questions, feel free to comment on the video, or again, you can find me on Twitter and other social media platforms. So I hope everyone had a wonderful Monday, and I will see you all again tomorrow.